Okay, so we're going to be studying Pirqe Abot tonight. Um, so I am going to be reading the first chapter, and I'm going to start from the middle of the chapter because last year we actually did the beginning of the chapters. I don't want to repeat it again. Everything has been recorded. It's all on YouTube, so it's all there for anybody who wants to see it. Um, just confirm for me that you can all hear me. Everybody can hear me well. Yes, how you doing, Yosef? Everything good in where are you in Arizona?
Arizona, yeah, Baruch Hashem, everything's good.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to be reading Pirkei Avot Perek Aleph, um, Halakha Tet. Let me find the place, and we will begin. Okay, first Mishnah, Perek Aleph Halakha Tet, Shimon ben Shattach Omer. Okay. הווה מרבה לחקור את העדים. והווה זהיר בדבריך שמתוכה נלמדו לשקר. Okay, Shimon ben Shattach. Let me tell you a little about Shimon ben Shattach. And actually, let me first tell you what it is he says. And then based on what he says, you will understand who he was. Okay? So Shimon ben Shattach says, when you are in trial, when you are sitting as a judge in trial, you should be very careful to interrogate the witnesses sufficiently, right? Don't minimize the interrogation of the witnesses because ultimately, yeah, right. Because ultimately, the interrogation of the witnesses, the any fact in Jewish law is established based on the testimony of the witnesses. Al pi shenaim edim yakum davar. So facts are established by the witnesses. So because facts are established by the witnesses, it's very important to carefully interrogate the witnesses so that if they are lying or they are being deceptive or misleading, you will be aware of that. Because when you make the Pesach Halacha, it's going to be based on the facts. The facts are based on the witnesses. So you must be very careful not to be lax in that process. So, have marbe lahakor et ha'edim. Make sure to interrogate the witnesses sufficiently and carefully. And finally, v'haveh zahir b'dvarecha. If you're the judge, you're now a judge. You have to be careful what you say. Now, you're going to ask questions for the witnesses, and the witnesses are going to understand what you're leading to. That's not good. The witnesses should not understand what you're leading to, because if they understand what you're leading to, then they will be trying to deceive you, right? So it's important, therefore, to be careful when you talk to the witnesses and don't let them know what it is that you're trying to establish, right? So do it in a careful way. That's the foundation of the court and the court system. That the trials have to be carefully conducted, and ultimately justice must be had. By justice, we don't. Well, today justice means something else. Today justice means whatever it is we want, right? But actually, justice has another meaning. The meaning is we have facts, and then there are laws that are applicable to the facts, and you apply the law to the facts. That's the ultimate justice, right? Not what I like or what I don't like. So let me tell you a little about Shimon ben Shattach. Shimon ben Shattach was the brother-in-law of King Yanai. Yanai HaMelech was one of the Hashmonaim kings, and his wife was Shalom Sion HaMalka, and Shalom Sion HaMalka was the sister of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach. Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, together with Yehuda ben Tabai, they were the heads of the Sanhedrin. They were the heads of the Jewish court. And There's a story that's brought in Masechet Hagigah in the Yerushalmi. It's Perek Bet, Halacha Bet in the Yerushalmi, and the story goes as follows. And the story is good because it explains why Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach just said what he said. And the story is as follows. So in the days of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, there was a lot of witchcraft and sorcery, right? Now there's a pasuk in the Torah that says, "Kol mechashefa lo tehayyeh." It is forbidden to allow a witch to remain alive. Now, the witches were women who performed sorcery and magic for their clients. Judaism, the Torah, looks down upon magic and sorcery, right? The Torah is very anti magical incantations, or let's say wearing a kamiyah. I know a lot of people like to wear a kamiyah. They think it's a great thing. It's not. The Torah is against that because the idea of magic is that the laws of nature are not important. And more significantly, what you do as an individual is not important. What's important is the magic, right? So the idea of magic, and I probably spoke about this before, but it's a type of sickness that plagues Am Yisrael till today. If you go to Israel and you listen to some of the religious radio stations, they always have these magical things that they're selling people, and they say we have these great Kabbalistic rabbis in the room right now. We can't even say what their names are because if you heard of their names, you won't believe it. And we're about to sell you this thing. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it's the holy knife, Sakina Kadosh. Sometimes it's the Gavia HaKadosh, the Holy Grail. I'm sorry, did I just say Holy Grail? I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say a holy goblet, not a Holy Grail. I apologize. Sometimes it's the Asherah, the Avodah Zarah tree of the. I'm sorry, I just said Asherah. I meant to say Ha'ilana Kadosh. I didn't mean to say Asherah, of course, because an Asherah is actual idolatry. This is just a holy tree. So they sell you these things, and they say these things will magically help you in your life. Yeah, I just got that community magazine. What is it called? It comes to my mailbox. I don't know where they got my name. So it's one of these community magazines. So can you give me a moment? I know this. Will you give me a moment? I have to get this. I wasn't, as I'm talking, I'm thinking about this. I apologize. I will be back in a minute. I want to see if I can find this magazine. Give me a moment. So the name of the magazine is Ami Living. I don't know. Maybe some of you get it as well. So so I'm reading to you now, Cain Ayin Hara. Um, um, the Rebbitzin Adel Miller from Yerushalayim, removing Ayin Hara through Blade Gissen, is a known segula to aid with issues of health, shidduchim, childbearing, parnasa, anxiety, and other difficulties. So basically what this person is saying, that she will solve your problems, not because you merit the solution to the problems, right? And not because you deserve it, not because you help yourself, but she's going to do Blade Gissen. So what is Blade Gissen? I was actually curious. So Blade Gissen, an expert, Rebbitzin Miller is an expert in using the segula of Blade Gissen, pouring of lead. So some of the old, grandmothers from the old, they would read like the coffee, on the bottom of the coffee, very, very scientific way to tell about a person, right? The coffee. This is even more scientific. Blagisin is lead. I guess she gets molten lead, and based on the shape of the lead, she will tell you what's wrong in your life, and magically your life will improve. I mean, this is the Torah is completely opposed to this. This is pagan. I mean, this is rank paganism of the lowest form. Even an average, Gentile, and even with a low education, I hope I'm not over giving too much credit to the Gentiles, because I see the type of people we have today. But I think an average person would understand that this is utter nonsense. We've kind of evolved past this, right? But no, we still have this in the Jewish people, and this is in a mainstream magazine, right? A mainstream magazine bringing this type of not nonsense, not just nonsense, but anti-Torah nonsense. And so the Torah hates magic tremendously. So we have that in the religious institutions. They promote anti-Torah nonsense. Elliot, make sure to watch the first 5 minutes that you just missed, because you would really like it. I'm saying it again. Religious institutions promote anti-Torah nonsense. The Torah is there to make us go past the nonsense of this paganism. And here we have the exact opposite. So in the religious stations in Israel, by the Ilana Kadosh, by the holy tree, by the holy knife, by the holy this, and you will be blessed. Okay. What does the Torah say? If there is a witch performing magic in Am Yisrael, according to Judaism, she should be executed. That's Asarisi. The Torah is opposed to magic and all the nonsense of magic. Okay, so what happened? In the days of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, there was a lot of that nonsense going around. Unlike today, where we don't have a Sanhedrin to deal with these issues, in those days we had a Sanhedrin. And the head of the Sanhedrin was Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach. And he did something very unusual. He had a trial in which he arrested 80 of these witches. I don't know if they did Blakeism or something else. Maybe that's what they were doing. Maybe they were selling. I don't know what they were doing, but whatever it is, he took 80 of these witches and he executed them in one day. And it was an unusual thing to do, because generally the Sanhedrin would not execute people. It was like very rare to execute people, but this was the one exception. And the reason he did it is because the Torah is so opposed to witchcraft and sorcery that he said we have to get rid of this nonsense. Oddly enough, this was done in the city of Ashkelon. Ashkelon is in the south of Israel. I say oddly enough because if you go to Ashkelon today, a lot of the people on the Forbes 50 of Israel, they have a Forbes 50 list, live in Ashkelon. They make tremendous money and literally, I would say tremendous money. I mean that literally, they're on the Forbes top rich people in Israel today are different rabbinic personages who sell magic to poor people. And these people think that they will be saved by buying this magical whatever. And they all live in Ashkelon. So I think Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach had something right when he was doing this. So anyway, this is in the city of Ashkelon. He arrested these 80 witches and he had them hung on the same day. Okay. So now.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, but for them, it's only a business. They're not looking at it against the Torah. I mean, look, Hashem blessed them with Parnassah. They're on the Forbes list because they're doing these type of things. But to them, it's only a business. They're not looking to scam the people or convince the people. They're there to make money.
Right. So let me tell you something important. First of all, doing idolatry or witchcraft because it's a business is not an excuse for doing it any more than eating non-kosher because it's but the point is that's not an excuse for doing it. It's still the avon is still the avon, right? But more importantly, so you're ever here, do you know the names of any sorcerers from the biblical days? Yeah, his name was Bil'am, right? And why did Bil'am do it? For the money. They all do it for the money. What do you think? These mechashefot didn't do it for the money? Right? They always do it for the money, of course. Nobody's gonna, palm reader does it for the money. So the fact that it's done for money doesn't make it any more justifiable. Now, the people paying the money, the suckers paying the money for this nonsense, they believe in it, right? And you're promoting paganism in the minds of these people who believe in this paganism because supposedly big rabbis are selling this paganism to them. So you're corrupting the minds of these people. So instead of trying to improve their lives by perhaps introspecting, maybe I'm doing something wrong, or perhaps try a little harder. Maybe I'm making some mistakes, right? Maybe I don't work well. Maybe my work ethics aren't good. I mean, there's all types of reasons why people don't succeed in life, you know. But if you believe in magic, instead of trying to help yourself, right, and instead of trying to establish a relationship with God, which is a meaningful relationship, everything is transformed to magic. The Torah absolutely deplores magic. There aren't too many sins for which the penalty is death penalty, but mechasheva is one of them. So, getting back to the story, the sons of these witches, they were very bitter that their moms were killed, and they decided to hatch a plan. They decided to hatch a plan in which they will take revenge against Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach. And the plan was based upon the premise that the Torah says, Al pi shenaim edim yakum davar. What establishes a legal fact in court? What establishes a legal fact in court is the testimony of the witnesses. Okay, so they got two of these people, they got together, they had a whole, meeting. They found two people who are great at lying. And these two people came to court and they testified that the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach was guilty of a crime for which the penalty is death. So what happened? So they took the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, because the way it works there is the minute the trial is over, on the spot, there is no death row, you go right to the execution. So they took the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, and as they were taking him to be executed, he said the following sentence. I'm going to say it in Hebrew, and then after I say it in Hebrew, I will explain it. I will translate it into English. He says, Im en bi avon ze lo tehe mitati kapara alai. I'm sorry. Let me repeat that. Im yesh bi avon ze, I made a mistake. Im yesh bi avon ze lo tehe mitati kapara alai. He says, if I'm actually guilty of the crime of which I have been accused, then my death should not be kapara for me. Now, I want you to understand the significance of that. In Judaism, if somebody is guilty of a crime for which the penalty is death, before he dies, he's supposed to say, Hatati aviti pashati. And if he makes teshuvah, and he says, may the death that I'm now going to receive be kapara for the sin that I made, it actually works, meaning it's kapara for his sin. Just so you understand. So anybody in their right mind, if he's going to be executed, what does he do? He says vidui, he confesses the sin, and he prays to God that the death shall be his kapara. Right? Of course. Who wouldn't do that? I mean, you're about to go to Olam Haba. You want to go to a good place, right? What does he say? He says the exact opposite. He says, if I'm guilty of this sin, I pray that this death should not expiate me from the sin that I'm being accused of. That's pretty powerful. But then he continues that. But on the other hand, im en bi avon ze, if I am not guilty of this sin, right? He says that he says Yehe kolar talui besavar edim. May there be a collar around the necks of the witnesses who falsely accused me of this sin, and may they be damned for what they did. Okay, now the witnesses were there and they heard the whole thing and they began to panic. They were panicking and they realized that they really made a big mistake. They were scared. I mean, they realized that, they're going to lose everything. Olam hazeh, olam haba. So they immediately went back to court, meaning they called the judges back. Now remember, they're taking the son out to be executed. And they told the judges, please, we want to recant our testimony. We made a mistake. We only testified because we wanted to take revenge against Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, what he did to our moms, the witches. So they said, we made a mistake. We recant the testimony. Please, don't kill this young man. And now, just so you understand, There is a halacha. It's from Masechet Ketuvot Daf Yod Het, and it's also in Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Mem Dalet. There is a halacha that says as follows: Kevan shehigid shuv eno chozer umagid. It's a law as follows: if a witnesses make testimony, present testimony in court, and they're interrogated, and the testimony is accepted by the court, and it's over, the testimony finished, a witness is not allowed to come back to court to revise his original testimony. That's it. Kevan shehigid, shuv eno chozer umagid. And because of that principle, the Shimon ben Shattach, who was the head of the court, and notwithstanding that it was his son that was going to be executed, he says, well, we can't do it, right? You can't recant your testimony. I mean, I'd love for you to recant your testimony, but it's too late. So what happened? His son was executed. So now we understand the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach when he says, you can never over interrogate the witnesses. Witnesses can be incredibly clever at trying to hide the truth. Okay, so interrogate them again, and do it again if you need to, because the witnesses could be lying. That's what happened to his son. So I wanted to give you that background so that you understand what that was about. Okay, so that was a Mishnah of Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach. I am now going to go to the next Mishnah. Okay. I'm not going to go to the next Mishnah. Where are we up to? Halacha Yod. Okay. Shemaya ve'Abtalion kibelu mehem. So the Talmidim of Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shattach, they were, as I said, the Nasi and the Abbetin of the Sanhedrin of the Jewish people. Now, the next generation was Shemaya ve'Abtalion. Shemaya ve'Abtalion were themselves Nasi and Abbetin of the Sanhedrin. And there's something interesting about them, and it is as follows. They were both the descendants of proselytes. In the days of the Second Temple, the Jewish nation was very powerful, it was very successful, and many Goyim converted to Judaism. Okay, and Shemaya ve'Avtalion were the descendants of these converts. Indeed, the Gemara says in Masechet Gittin Daf Nun Zayin, the Gemara says that they weren't just the descendants of any Goyim, any Gentiles, but they were descendants of Sanherib Melech Ashur. Sanherib Melech Ashur wrought tremendous destruction in the land of Israel. They were his descendants. So what we're now going to study is the words of Shemaya ve'Avtalion. And I first want to relate to you a story about Shemaya ve'Avtalion. It's in the Gemara in Masechet Yoma. I want to read to you the story. And the reason I'm reading it is because my father brings a story in his book, The Shadow of History, and I think it's just a beautiful story. So I'd like to share it with you. And it's as follows. Ma'aseh. I'm reading now the Gemara in Masechet Yoma Daf Ayin Aleph. I'm reading to you the Gemara. Ma'aseh v'chohen gadol echad she'asa mibet hamikdash. It was in the days of the Second Temple, and as I said, in the days of the Second Temple, it was the Hashmonaim kingdom. The Hashmonaim were incredibly successful. The land of Israel, the Jewish people were at its zenith. We were very respected by the nations as having a powerful army. The temple was beautiful. It was magnificent. And the holiest day of the year was the day of Yom Kippur. On the day of Yom Kippur was a fabulous, incredible experience to be in the Bet HaMikdash on the day of Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol was awake all night studying Torah. And after being awake all night, it's not like when when we're awake till 4 in the morning on Shavuot, right? And then we're like, it's time to pray. And like, right? We're all like falling asleep already. We can't pray. We have, okay. After being awake all night, he has to spend the whole day doing incredibly difficult physical work in the Bet HaMikdash. All the korbanot, all the zerikot hadam. The Kohen Gadol had a huge day in front of him. So at the end of Yom Kippur, there was a tremendous celebration, a feeling of tremendous happiness, because on that day, there was the Se'ir HaMishtaleach LaAzazel. There was tremendous kaparat avonot for the Jewish people. It was tremendous, tremendous joy for the Jewish people, tremendous joy for the Jewish people. So at the end of the day, when the Kohen Gadol was leaving the Bet HaMikdash, everybody would be following the Kohen Gadol, happy, walking with him towards his house, and there was it was euphoria. It was a high point of the Jewish nation. Inshallah, we should be zochim to see that b'mehera amen ken yeh ratzon. Anyway, so the Gemara says, Ma'aser Kohen Gadol echad she'asa mi Bet HaMikdash. So it was after Yom Kippur, after this grueling night and day, and the Kohen Gadol was leaving the Bet HaMikdash and following him, Halechu kol ha'am acharav. And after the Kohen Gadol, the people were following the Kohen Gadol as was the custom. Kevan shera'u et Shemaya ve'Avtalion. Something unusual happened. As they were walking with the Kohen Gadol, they saw leaving the Bet HaMikdash Shemaya ve'Avtalion. Shemaya ve'Avtalion, as I said, were the heads of the Sanhedrin. They left the Kohen Gadol and they went to join Shemaya ve'Avtalion. Let me tell you the way I understand this. What I understand this is that Shemaya ve'Avtalion themselves were going to join the Kohen Gadol, and we'll see that in the story itself, right? So what they did is they left the Kohen Gadol, but it wasn't disrespectful that they left him, because they were now going to Shemaya ve'Avtalion, who themselves were going to join the Kohen Gadol. So they went to pay respect to Shemaya ve'Avtalion, and they joined now Shemaya ve'Avtalion. Lasof ba'u Shemaya ve'Avtalion lipared ma'Kohen Gadol, and then Shemaya ve'Avtalion eventually go towards the Kohen Gadol together with the people, with the kahal, and they reach the Kohen Gadol, and the goal is to say to skule shanim rabot, al val sineh, whatever we say, right? Amar lahem, when the Kohen Gadol saw Shemaya ve'Avtalion, he was upset. He felt that the people dishonored him, and he said something stinging. He said, Yavo v'nei ha'amim leshalom. The Kohen Gadol said to Shemaya ve'Avtalion, welcome unto the children of the nation. By referring to Shemaya ve'Avtalion as the children of the nations, he was, of course, implying that they're proselytes, that they're Bnei Gerim. They weren't proselytes themselves. They were the children of proselytes. And as I said, they were descendants of Sancheriv HaMelech, who Sancheriv HaMelech was one of the destroyers of the Jewish people, right? So he says, Yavo'u v'nei ha'amim leshalom. Let the children of the nations come in peace. Okay. Amrulo, the Gemara continues, and it says that Shemaya ve'Avtalion replied to the Kohen Gadol as follows. Yavo'u leshalom v'nei ha'amim she'osim ma'aseh Aharon. Let the children of the nations come in peace, in so much as the children of the nations are following in the ways of Aharon. Aharon is the first Kohen, of course, right? And what was Aharon? Aharon was Rodef Shalom. So Shemaya ve'Avtalion is saying, we may be the children of the nations, but we joined the Jewish people, and we were seeking peace with the Jewish people. And in this way, we are like Aharon HaKohen. who is Rodef Shalom. Ve'al yavo ben Aharon leShalom, but let not the biological children of Aharon come in peace. She'eno oseh ma'aseh Aharon. For so long as this biological son of Aharon, meaning this particular Kohen Gadol, is not following in the ways of Aharon. What a beautiful story, right? Ethnicity is not the issue, right? What is the issue is substance. How is a person behaving, right? And their point is, you can be the child of Aharon, but if you're not behaving like Aharon, you're not Aharon and you don't represent Aharon. We can be the children of proselytes, but if we're behaving like Aharon, we are representing him and we are therefore continuing the legacy of Aharon. I thought it's a beautiful story. As I told you, my father always used to bring this story. He brings it in the Golden Doves, and I very much enjoy that story. So I wanted to share it with you. Nevertheless, let us now look at the substance of the and that story is in Masechet Yoma Daf Ayin Aleph if you wanted to look at it. Let's look now at the substance of the Mishnah. Okay. Shemaya Omer, Ehov et hamelacha usno et harabbanut. I'm sorry. Ehov et hamelacha usno et harabbanut. Okay. You should love work. You should love work, and you should hate lordship. Let me explain to you what that means. Let us start with Ehov et hamelacha. Ehov et hamelacha answers the following question. Why do we work? Do we work because, well, we really don't want to work? We'd rather be drinking margaritas in a Caribbean island and have no work at all, ever, right? But we work because it's a necessary evil, otherwise we won't be able to survive. But if we didn't need to work, we wouldn't work, right? That's one theory. Shemaya rejects that theory. What Shemaya says is, he actually says that, no, we work because it's a good thing. It's good to work. It builds character. It makes you a responsible person. It makes you self-reliant. You should work, and it's good for you. And therefore, you should love the fact that you get to work and that you have something to do, something productive. There's an Abot Rabbi Natan, which addresses this statement. It's Pirqe Yod Aleph, for those of you who want to check it out. And Abot Rabbi Natan actually says the following. And I'm reading. Let's say a person doesn't have to work. Doesn't have work. So what should he do? You say, okay, well, you don't have work, that's great, don't work. No. He said, well, what should you do? So some people say, go to a Caribbean island, drink a tequila. Other people say, go to the Beis Midrash and study Torah. But interesting, in Abot Rabbi Natan, he says, find a haser, a courtyard that is destroyed, that is run down. Oh, sadeh hareva, find a field that it's all run down and work it. Go, work it, fix it. Fix the courtyard, clean out the field, plow it, do something useful. Work is a good thing. And then he says something I thought is wild. Keshem shehatorah nitena bibrit, kacha melacha nitena bibrit. The same way the Torah was given, and the Torah is given to the Jewish people within the context of a covenant, a sacred covenant at Sinai, Har Sinai. Also, work was given to us as part of a sacred covenant. Kacha melacha nitena bibrit, shene'emar Sheshet yamim ta'avod ve'asita kol melachatecha. The pasuk says you should work for 6 days, and on those 6 days do melacha. Right? So this is Abot Rabbi Natan. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying in a negative fashion, but unfortunately, so for example, before I spoke about magic, and there's no nice way to say that it's wrong for rabbinic personalities to peddle magic because it's against the Torah. So I apologize, but there's just no nice way to say it. I mean, I cannot beat around the bush. We're studying it and have to explain it properly. So I apologize ahead of time. I don't like being critical. I like explaining things clearly. And when I explain things clearly, I like leaving no doubts as to what I'm saying. One of the things that amazes me is they have these shidduchim services in Israel. And I'm sure it's like that maybe here also. I don't know. So in Israel, so you're going to shidduch service. So what does the young man do? So if you say the young man studies all day in the kollel, that's wonderful. So then we can talk about other things. We can talk about, how you can be as a husband or whatever. If you go to a shidduch service in Bnei Brak and most places in Jerusalem, and you say the young man works, what? What are you coming to me? Shagets. If you work, don't even come to the shidduch service. I mean, that is considered like beneath anything that anybody would want, right? I just find it fascinating because that's anti-Torah. The Torah, when Hashem puts Adam HaRishon in Gan Eden, what does he say to Adam HaRishon?
Le'ovda u'leshomraha.
Thank you. Right there. What does le'ovda mean?
To work.
It means to work. Yeah, it means to work. Right? Exactly. Explicitly. And what do we see from the statement here of Shemaya? Ehov et hamelacha. Work is a good thing, right? And furthermore, later on in Pirqe Abot, it says, Kol Torah, she'enim hamelacha, sofa betela. If you study Torah, but you don't have a vocation, right? That Torah is going to become annulled. Because when you have the whole, and by the way, I went to yeshiva in Israel and I studied Baruch Hashem, and I spent, my time studying. And for me, studying Torah is not just when I was in yeshiva. It was, it's every day, every night, middle of the night, 2 a.m, 3 a.m. That's studying Torah, right? But when you have all the time to study, and I've seen it, I've gone into yeshivas, it becomes very fluffy. Okay, but it doesn't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. My experience doesn't matter. What does matter is what Shemaya told us. Now, I want to say more than that. We know, and I'm going to read to you what this great-grandson of Harambam says. Give me a moment. Rabbi David Hanagid, the grandson of Harambam. Let me see if I can find this. Give me a moment. The Mishnah.
Why was he called Nagid specifically, not his father or his grandfather?
Well, he was a political leader in the Jewish community. So that was the title.
Oh,
Let me read to you what he says. When a person does not have a vocation, he's gonna end up he's gonna go down. The person is gonna go down. When all you have to do is study all the time. And I'm not talking about at all ages of your life. Eventually you reach a point in your life where you can just do nothing but study, and that's great. But if you have no melacha, if you never worked, you have no vacation, you didn't have to achieve, you didn't have to do anything, well, you're gonna stagnate as a person. And a person who's stagnating is not going to be able to study Torah. So, and then he says, we saw the greatest hachamim of the Jewish people, Shem Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was the greatest Hakam of his generation. Miracles used to happen to him left and right. The Abba Hilkiah, another great Hakam. It was such a great Hakam when the Hakamim needed rain, they went to him to pray for rain, and it worked immediately. And Abba Hilkiah was working all day in the field, right? How can that be? So Abba Hilkiah, if he would go to Bnei Brak and want to find a wife, they would kick him out of the shidduch service, right? Because he's beneath anything. Rabbi Yochanan Asandlar. Now, even Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who was in favor of studying Torah all the time, meaning not for everybody, but for the Chachamim who can study Torah all the time. But my father, Alav Shalom, I mean, he worked most of his life. He was a professor, he was a teacher, and then when he was older, he used to study Torah all the time, night and day and night. All he used to do was study Torah all the time. There was no such thing as, him kind of taking a break, right? So there are people at the level where they can study Torah all the time. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was one of them. But even Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he says in Masechet Nedarim Daf Mem Tet that Gedola melacha shemechabedet be'alea. He says work is the best thing to bring honor to yourself. If you have a hard day work and you did something and you made some money, you're honoring yourself. It's a great thing. Gedola melacha. It's praiseworthy because it brings you accomplishment. And I want to read to you what the Gemara says in it says this in Masechet Pesachim, Daf Kof Yod Gimel. Okay, I'm reading the Gemara now. It's a quote. Peshot nevelta beshuka. If you have no work to do, right? Do even the lowest work possible. What's the lowest work possible in those days? So they say maybe be a garbage man. Okay. There's nothing wrong with being a garbage man. Garbage man, you're making an honest living. I respect that. That's praiseworthy. So, but the Gemara brings a different example. A leather tanner. The leather tanning was the most filthy, smelly, repulsive work that there was. And it says, go to the shuk and take a dead carcass and remove the leather from the dead carcass. And get paid for this. Don't say, oh, no, this is beneath me. Ubushali, boshali. That's because I'm embarrassed to do this. Be embarrassed. You're working. It's honorable to work. What did the Bishmam Yochai said? You're honoring yourself by working. It's not hype to work. So I just don't understand where this modern thing comes from. Like among some of the super religious, it seems that super religious means go away from Torah and follow something else. I really don't understand what that has to do with. That if somebody works, he's like, oh, he's not good enough. Kick him out from the shidduch place, or make him marry a Sephardic girl. That's better. Sephardic, a Frank. You marry a Frank. That's a solution to the thing. Only a Frank can marry somebody who works. Okay, so this is Torah. There's Torah, and there's pretend Torah. Pretend Torah, you know what pretend Torah is. Real Torah is what the Chachamim tell us it is. That's all. I have no other way of putting it. Let's continue. Ehov et hamelacha. Usna et harabanut. If you have an opportunity to become a powerful person, power, lordship, run away. Because politicians become arrogant, they become corrupt, and it never does them any good. We have a politician who was a great man, who was a Sadiq, who was an absolute Sadiq, and yet his life was shortened. So he was the best Sadiq, he didn't become corrupt. His name was Yosef. Yosef, a Sadiq, was the highest level of Sidkut. Right? Nobody like Yosef a Sadiq, the greatest. And yet, he died at a young age. He died before all of his brothers. And the Chachamim say why? Because that's what power does to you. It shortens one's life. So husna et rabbanut, hate power, hate authority, don't want any of that, right? Who says this? Shemaiah. And let's see. Ve'al titvada lareshut. Now you say, okay, I'm not going to become a politician, but I will become friendly with politicians. I'll become involved with them. Be careful. Be careful. It could be trouble. They're always looking to abuse people, to sting people, to manipulate people. Al titvada lareshut. Don't expose yourself to the political authority. It can only be trouble. And stay away from trouble, right? Let me read to you what Harambam says on this. Ha'ekerut im hamelech, you say, I'm going to become friendly with the king. What can be greater? I'm going to become friendly with the king. Kasha me'od lehinasel mimena. If the king knows you, he's going to use you. And it's very difficult to save yourself at this point. Ultimately, it will make you go away from the law. Because when you become obsessed with getting this type of relationship with the political authorities, you begin to play games, to do things you're not supposed to do. Let me tell you what happened with Doeg HaEdomi. Doeg HaEdomi was the head of the Sanhedrin in the days of David HaMelech, and I'm sorry that I'm a little sore. I'm overcoming a laryngitis, and now that I've been talking for close to 50 minutes, it's beginning to come back. So give me a moment. Doeg HaEdomi was the head of the Sanhedrin in the days of David HaMelech. He was Gadol Hador in knowledge of Torah. Doeg HaEdomi is one of the people that's mentioned in Masechet Sanhedrin in Perek Helek, she'en laim helek le'olam haba. How can this person have lost his portion in the world to come? I mean, he's the Gadol Hador. So he wanted to find favor in the eyes of the king. He wanted to align himself with the king. And what happened? Shaul HaMelech became obsessed with David. He thought David wants to kill him. He thought David wants to take his job. Nothing could be further from the truth. David had no intention of doing either of those and did not want either of those things. Nevertheless, David HaMelech became a wanted person, and he runs away to Nov Ira Kohanim, a city of Kohanim. And Chazat, these Kohanim, they didn't know anything. They didn't know that David HaMelech is wanted by Shaul. They didn't know that. So David HaMelech goes. They give him the knife of Goliath. The knife of Goliath, after David HaMelech used it, he brought it to Nov Ira Kohanim. Now he says, I need it back. They gave him food. He ate food. And then he leaves. Shaul HaMelech comes to Nov Ira Kohanim. And he finds out that they helped David. And they're shocked. They're like, yeah, of course we helped David. He's your son-in-law. I mean, he's the head of your army. Why wouldn't we help him? And he was a little, Chazit, Shaul was a little, Shaul himself was not, his faculties were not there. So he says, he orders his people to execute the Kohanim. I mean, literally to massacre the Kohanim. It's simply one of the most disturbing stories. I mean, really disturbing. But nobody's willing to do it. They're terrified. I mean, who in his right mind is going to kill Kohanim? It's Nov Ira Kohanim. Who would kill the Kohanim? So Doeg HaEdomi was there. And Doeg HaEdomi said, I'll do it. I'll kill them. Now, the reason he did this is because he wanted to find favor in the eyes of the king. Not to mention, Doeg HaEdomi is the one who put it in Shaul's mind that David was there. I didn't give you the whole story. Nevertheless, he killed the Kohanim. He killed the Kohanim because when a person wants to find favor in the eyes of the king, you lose your direction and you do crazy things. And he lost his olam haba. That's it. It was over. En lo chalek lo olam haba. So al titfada la reshut. Don't think, oh, the king, I'll find favor in the eyes of the king. Start playing these games, doing whatever you can do, because it's not a good thing. It never is. All right. Let's look at the next Mishnah. We have about 6 minutes.
I have a quick question, if I may.
Of course.
So Nasi and Av Beit Din are not Rabbanut and Rashut, or are they different than these public offices or political positions?
Right. So they're talking about in the executive branch, the kings, right, the ministers, the lords, because while, of course, the Sanhedrin, as the head of the Sanhedrin, they had authority as the judges of Israel, but that is not that's not what's mentioned by Reshut. By Reshut, they're talking about kings and people like that who amass wealth, who amass power, who have armies, who have this. The Sanhedrin didn't have any power. They didn't have any, they had the power to act as judges, right? But when the king didn't like them, the story is that in the desert of Shatach, Yanai HaMelech killed all the Sanhedrin. They couldn't do anything. They were defenseless. They literally were defenseless. He massacred them, right? And then Shimon ben Shattah had to run away. Maybe in the Knesset Shabbat, I'll say why he came back and what happened. Right, so that's fine. That's acceptable to be on the Sanhedrin. I would say that the real Hachamim would even run away from those types of honors, right? And they wouldn't want to be invited to participate. That I know my father, Alav Shalom, even if he was in a situation where they invite him to, participate or, and sit somewhere, he always wanted to sit on the side or in the back or in the this. He never sought. So even in things like that, you also have to be a little careful. That's a fact. Okay. Let's continue. So we'll probably do this maybe next week or maybe in Knesset Shabbat. And what we'll do next week is we were going to skip forward, depending on how far I get in my synagogue. But let's read this. Avtalion Omer. Avtalion was a partner of Shemaiah. He says as follows: Hachamim hizaharu b'dibrechem. He says the teachers, the wise men of Israel, the Hachamim of Israel, have to be very careful in what they say, in the words they choose. Language, the choice of language. Be careful. Shemeh tahobu chobat galut. Because if you're not careful, right, you may end up saying something that can be misconstrued. And if it's misconstrued, you will be causing the people who hear that to have a false view of the Torah, a wrong view of the Torah, and then you'll be bringing exile upon yourself and upon these people. And what's going to happen? And then you will go to exile to a place where the water is very unhealthy. And the students who will be following you are going to drink from this water and they can die because it's bad water. And this will bring about a desecration of God's name. Okay, obviously, this is a parable, right? The bad water represents bad ideas. And what's happening here is that because the rabbi, the Hacham, was not careful in what he said, and the students developed certain bad ideas, and these bad ideas were opposed to the Torah, and these bad ideas were opposed to the mitzvot. But people bought these bad ideas. They believed in these bad ideas, and they acted improperly, and they desecrated God's name, right? So I'm going to elaborate more about this on Shabbat, but there was a great Hacham that Rambam in his Perush here, he says, it's referring to Antignos ish socho. And Antignos ish socho, several generations earlier, once said that when you do the mitzvot, don't do the mitzvot like the avadim that are looking to get some sort of reward or some sort of tip from the master, but do it with the view that you're not going to get anything. So the students, they heard this and they reached a false conclusion. The false conclusion was that there is no reward in the world to come. Of course, that's not correct. There is reward in the world to come. We believe in Sachar Va'onesh. That's one of the 13 principles. But the students heard this, and Antignos ish socho, of course, meant nothing of that nature, right? But had he chosen his language a little more carefully, they wouldn't have made that mistake. But because he chose the language that he chose, and they made that mistake, the Baitosim and the Sadokim, people who had false views about Judaism, who ended up opposing the Hachamim, who ended up joining the Greeks or the Gentile culture, right? They developed from this idea, false idea, albeit, but that's how they came about. So very important that when you teach Torah in a precise fashion, and you don't allow your language to the extent that you can, right? Because you can't always control everything, but try to choose precise language where the possibility of error is minimized. That's the lesson. And on Shabbat B'li Neder, I will give a few more insights into this Mishnah. Are there any questions? Okay, so have a good night. Shabbat Shalom, and all the best.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Zag Baruch.
Zag Baruch.